Hi guys, this is Connie, back for some more Connie Reads White Fragility. We are on, I think, chapter 4. This is going to be section 3. Oh, what is that? Constantly distracted by something, which is why I totally forgot to do the reading. This is going to be section 3, titled The Good Old Days. And I just didn't make enough time to do a bigger section, so we're going to do at least this one. Keep falling forward. The Good Old Days. How does race shape the lives of white people? It's chapter 4. This section's called The Good Old Days. As a white person, I can openly and unabashedly reminisce about, quote, the good old days, unquote. Romanticized recollections of the past and calls for a return to former ways are a function of white privilege, which manifests itself in the ability to remain oblivious to our racial history. Claiming that the past was socially better than the present is also a hallmark of white supremacy. Consider any period in the past from the perspective of people of color. 246 years of brutal enslavement, the rape of black women for the pleasure of white men and to produce more enslaved workers, the selling off of black children, the attempted genocide of indigenous people, Indian removal acts and reservations, indentured servitude, lynching and mob violence, sharecropping, Chinese exclusion laws, Japanese American internment, Jim Crow laws of mandatory segregation, black codes, bans on black jury service, bans on voting, imprisoning people for unpaid work, medical sterilization and experimentation, employment discrimination, educational discrimination, inferior schools, biased laws and policing practices, redlining and subprime mortgages, mass incarceration, racist media representations, cultural erasures, attacks and mockery, and untold and perverted historical accounts. And you can see how a romanticized past is strictly a white construct. It is a powerful construct because it calls out to a deeply internalized sense of superiority and entitlement, and the sense that any advancement for people of color is an encroachment on this entitlement. The past was great for white people, and white men in particular, because their positions went largely unchallenged. In understanding the power of white fragility, we have to notice that mere questioning of those positions triggered the white fragility that Trump capitalized on. There has been no actual loss of power for the white elite, who have always controlled our institutions and continue to do so by a very wide margin. Of the 50 richest people on earth, 29 are American. Of these 29, all are white. And all but 2 are men. Lauren Jobs inherited her husband's wealth, and Alice Walton's her father's. Similarly, the white working class has always held the top positions within blue-collar fields, the overseas labor leaders, and fire and police chiefs. And although globalization and the erosion of workers' rights has had a profound impact on the white working class, white fragility enabled the white elite to direct the white working class's resentment toward people of color. The resentment is clearly misdirected, given that people who control the economy and who have managed to concentrate more wealth into fewer white hands than ever before in human history are the white elite. Consider this data on the distribution of wealth. And there are several different points. Since 2015, the richest 1% has owned more wealth than the rest of the planet owns. 8 men own the same amount of wealth as do the poorest half of the world. The incomes of the poorest 10% of people increased by less than $3 a year between 1988 and 2011, while the income of the richest 1% increased 182 times as much. In Bloomberg's daily ranking of the world's 500 richest people, the world's wealthiest 3, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and Jeff Bezos, all white men, have total net worths of $85 billion, $79 billion, and $73 billion, respectively. By comparison, the 2015 gross domestic product of Sri Lanka was $82 billion, Luxembourg, $58 billion, and Iceland, $16 billion. Of the world's 10 richest people, 9 are white men. In 2015 to 2016, the world's 10 biggest corporations together had revenue greater than that of the government revenues of 180 countries combined. In the US, over the last 30 years, the growth in the incomes of the bottom 50% has been zero, whereas incomes of the top 1% have grown by 300%. The call to make America great again worked powerfully in service of the racial manipulation of white people, diverting blame away from the white elite and toward various peoples of color. For example, undocumented workers, immigrants, and the Chinese for the current conditions of the white working class. The romanticized traditional family values are also racially problematic. White families fled from cities to the suburbs to escape the influx of people of color, a process sociologists term white flight. They wrote covenants to keep schools and neighborhoods segregated and forbade cross-racial dating. Consider the extreme resistance to busing and other forms of school integration from white parents. In the landmark Supreme Court decision, Brown versus the Board of Education, the court ruled that separate was inherently unequal and that the schools needed to desegregate, quote, with all deliberate speed, unquote. Busing children from one neighborhood into a school in another to account for residential segregation became a major strategy of desegregation. And then it says in quotations, or in parentheses. Notably, white children were generally not bused into predominantly black schools. Instead, black children endured long bus rides to attend predominantly white schools. End of parentheses. Regina Williams, a black student from Roxbury, Massachusetts, was bused into a school in South Boston. She described her first day in a formerly all-white school as, quote, like a war zone. School officials, politicians, the courts, and the media gave precedence to the desires of white parents who overwhelmingly and vehemently opposed school desegregation. It has not been African Americans who resisted integration efforts. It has always been whites. The practice of our lives as a white collective has rarely been in alignment with the values we profess. At the minimum, this idealization of the past is another example of white experiences and perceptions. Let's see. At the minimum, this idealization of the past is another example of white experiences and perceptions positioned as universal. How might this nostalgia sound to any person of color who is aware of this country's history? The ability to erase this racial history has actually believe that the past was better than the present, quote, for everybody, has inculcated a false consciousness for me personally and as a national citizen. And that's the end of that section. So we will come in for another one next time. Be careful with that and enjoy. Please and thank you. And I will see you for the next installment next week. Have a great one. Bye.